Good morning and welcome to another webisode of All Politics Are Local. I'm WSAV digital reporter John Dowding. Every week we take the time to break down the local impact of news coming from Washington, D.C. with one of our reporters from Capitol Hill. Let's jump right in. This week the American public will have our first chance to witness the impeachment proceedings as they move from closed-door testimony to live hearings. The House impeachment inquiry will examine whether President Trump violated his oath of office by asking Ukraine to investigate his political rival, former Vice President, Joe Biden. Last week, White House Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney filed a lawsuit after defying a congressional subpoena to appear for questioning in a House panel. And joining us live from Capitol Hill is WSAV Washington correspondent Kelly Meyer. How are you doing today, Kelly?
I'm doing well, John. How are you doing?
Good, good. It's a little chilly here this morning, but we probably can't even complain. It's probably even colder up in D.C. But all right, let's jump let's jump right in to, it's going to be a really busy week. It's going to be a really busy week on the Hill. And so let's talk about the hearings that are going to be going on this week. When are they and who can we expect to hear from?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's definitely going to be a busy week. I know, of course, today is Veterans Day, so that we have federal offices and government buildings are closed, so no members of Congress are in that building behind me. But as soon as Tuesday hits, they will be back and ready to begin this impeachment inquiry. So it does actually start on Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. We hear from two witnesses. We're going to hear from George Kent and Bill Taylor. That will be starting at 10 a.m. And like you said, it is the first chance we're going to see this live and public. So actually also a very historic moment, because this has only happened three other times in history, or the third time in history this will be. So it's very historic and also very an important part of this whole impeachment inquiry process, that they voted to bring this public, bring it to a hearing process that's open, that people can be tuning in live on television. So we have Wednesday morning, 10 a.m. and also Friday morning, 10 a.m. And that's Marie Yovanovitch. She will also be testifying in that public hearing. So two big chances to hear from three major players in this impeachment inquiry. And we're very curious to see what they say openly. We just had a meeting here prepping for our coverage of this. It's going to be, like you said, very busy and a very, unexpected, what we may hear, unexpected week as well.
And I mean, what have you've obviously been speaking with our local representatives on the Hill the last week or so. Have you spoken to anybody, and what are their opinions about as we go into this week of the public hearings?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad you brought that up. We have Georgia Senator David Perdue, who was talking with us last week, and we also heard we had Senator Tom Tillis from North Carolina, and a few other members. That when we talk with them about other things happening on the Hill, impeachment inquiry has always been an absolute question we're going to kind of pick their brain on and see what they think. So I wanted to share a little bit of you with our interview when we caught up with Senator Perdue just here last week on Capitol Hill.
I want it to come to the Senate, and if it comes to the Senate, I want it to be aired out. The president wants it to be aired out, because when the people of America see what little they have here and they're trying to claim an impeachment cause, they'll see how ridiculous this is and how unfair it is.
So that's really the response I've been hearing from many of the Republicans, both on the House and the Senate side, calling this a sham impeachment process, as we've been discussing here on this show weekly, as we hear from Republicans in the House. It's very similar to what I heard from Republicans in the Senate, and as you just heard there from Senator Perdue. He's, of course, on the Senate side, so it has not moved there yet. But I know, as we were talking about last week, John, that we hear that this may be moving to the Senate. Senate is quietly preparing for that to happen. That would move into a trial. And Perdue, as I chatted with him, he said he wants to see it come to the Senate. He wants to see it all laid out on the table, so he feels they could show the American people that there's nothing there, as he says.
So, I mean, you just briefly touched on this point. What are our representatives on both sides? What are they looking to hear from these hearings? What are their goals for Democrats and Republicans from these impeachment hearings? What are they looking to find out?
Yeah, and I think that's an important part of it, is that they're really trying to dig in, as of course, for Democrats in the House. They want to dig in now before it goes into a really big, important election year. They want to show, as they say, that there is something here, that the president did commit some wrongdoing and he should be held accountable for it. Whereas Republicans, when you ask them, their immediate response is that no quid pro quo, there was nothing in that phone call, they stand by the president. So it's this divide, and really as soon as you see either when you talk to Republicans, it's no quid pro quo, there's nothing there. Democrats, they say there is something there, and they hope to prove that in these impeachment testimonies that we're going to be hearing, these very important public hearings happening this week.
All right, well, thank you for all of that breakdown. All right, we're going to pop over to our next topic, kind of bringing it a little local. Nearly half a dozen women made history in last week's municipal elections right here in the Coastal Empire and Low Country. In Bullock County, 3 women defeated male incumbents. It's a first in Statesboro's 216-year history. Right here in Chatham County, 2 women won mayoral races in Pooler and on Tybee Island. And right here in Savannah, 4 African-American women were elected into seats on City Council. We're a few months away from primary election season. So let's start off with this. How might local election trends here reflect any sort of national trends that you're seeing, Kelly?
That's a great point, John, and we did see some of that happening last week after we saw this, of course, these local elections happening. And people here in Washington were paying close attention because they want to see where the trends were going and if that will reflect in what happens in 2020. They took it as a clear sign, at least from the Democratic standpoint, that there is this blue wave happening. Of course, we saw a Democratic governor of Kentucky take over. Other elections we saw in Virginia where a lot of Democrats were taking over the House there. So they're seeing this as a predictor. They're taking it as a sign that Democrats are coming out in full force and voting in these elections. They voted this year, and that's what they expect to see next year. But it's really, a Washington, D.C. kind of angle of it, because you don't know from all the polling and everything like that just what exactly will happen. I feel like you can never really predict exactly how it's going to go, but they're trying to take this as a small little litmus test of how 2020 will fare for Democrats and Republicans.
And I think that's also why a lot of Democratic representatives have been in the Palmetto State, South Carolina, right across the river here in the last couple days. But we will talk more about that next week. Thank you so much, as always, Kelly, for joining us to speak and break down some of these things coming from the Hill.
Yeah. Of course.
All right, and News...
Thank you so much for having me. I always look forward to it.
Of course, Kelly. Thank you for coming. And News 3 is your local election headquarters. So remember to stay with News 3 on air and online for the very latest. Thank you again for watching. I'm John Dowding. We'll see you again next week on All Politics Are Local.